out, you old loser! You are a disgrace to this family!
She screamed this in front of 100 wealthy guests.
Get out, you old loser. You are a disgrace to this family. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, screamed into the microphone. She pointed a manicured finger at the door, her face twisted in disgust. 100 guests fell silent, staring at me, the man in the cheap coat standing on their expensive marble floor. They thought they were watching a wealthy couple humiliate a poor relative. They didn't know they were screaming at the landlord, who owned every brick of the mansion they stood in. But before that moment of justice, you need to understand how a father ended up kicked out of his own property by his son. I'm Thomas, 68. I drive a rattling 2005 sedan and buy discount shirts. To the world, I look like a poor retiree. What nobody sees, especially not my ungrateful son, Mark, is the massive real estate portfolio I've built over 40 years. I believe true wealth whispers. Unfortunately, Mark only listens to the loudest voice in the room, his wife, Jessica. I've seen betrayal and karma hit hard. If you enjoy stories where the arrogant get what they deserve, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss this ending. Mark wasn't always like this. He was humble until he met Jessica. She was obsessed with status. Because I didn't wear a Rolex, I became an embarrassment to her perfect image. She poisoned Mark against me. They stopped inviting me to dinners, then forgot my birthday. I never told them about my wealth. I wanted Mark to love me as a dad, not a bank. That was my mistake. Last week, Mark finally texted after months of silence. Housewarming party, Saturday, 6 p.m. 4500 Oakwood Lane. Dress nice. Don't embarrass us. I stared at the screen. They claimed to have bought their dream home in an exclusive community. I chuckled. My company, Summit Properties, owned that house. I called my manager, Henderson. It's a lease to own, sir, Henderson explained. Tenants are Mark and Jessica Turner. Minimal deposit, huge monthly payments. They barely qualified. I was stunned. They were renting from me through a shell company and didn't know it. To them, the owner was a faceless corporation. They had no idea the old loser they were ashamed of had signed their lease. I debated not going. Why face their insults? But I was curious. I wanted to see this palace and if my son had any decency left. Plus, I needed to inspect my investment. I put on my frayed suit and got into my old car. I had no idea that by the end of the night, I'd be homeless in their eyes, and they'd be homeless in reality. The drive to Oakwood Lane took about 40 minutes. As I approached the massive iron gates of the community, the security guard actually stepped out of his booth to stop me. He looked at my rusted sedan, then at the line of Porsches and Range Rovers behind me, and frowned. I had to show him the digital invitation on my phone just to get in. He let me pass, but his eyes followed me suspiciously. I didn't blame him. In this neighborhood, my car looked like a piece of scrap metal abandoned on a showroom floor. I drove slowly down the winding streets, lined with perfectly manicured lawns. Finally, I saw it. Number 4500. The house was magnificent, a modern colonial style, with white pillars and expansive windows. I smiled to myself. I remembered approving the renovation budget for this property 6 months ago. I had insisted on the Italian marble for the entryway and the imported slate for the roof. It was strange to look at my own investment and feel like an intruder. The driveway was already packed with luxury cars. I spotted a small gap near the front entrance, a perfect spot. As I turned the wheel to pull in, I saw her. Jessica was standing on the front porch, holding a glass of champagne. She looked stunning in a designer dress, but the moment she locked eyes with me, or rather, with my car, her face dropped. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. Instead, she practically ran down the steps, waving her hands frantically for me to stop. I rolled down the window. "Thomas, what do you think you are doing?" she hissed, her voice low but sharp. She looked around nervously to see if any of her friends were watching. "Hello, Jessica. I'm just parking," I said calmly. "Not here," she snapped, leaning in closer so the valet wouldn't hear. "Look at this thing. It's hideous. You're going to drip oil on the new pavers. We have important guests arriving, people from Mark's firm. We can't have this junk sitting front and center." I felt a sting of humiliation, but I pushed it down. "Where would you like me to park?" She pointed a manicured finger toward a thick hedge of bushes way down the street, almost outside the view of the house. "Park it around the corner, behind the landscaping service trucks, and walk back, quickly." I looked at her. I could have told her right then that I paid for those pavers she was so worried about. I could have told her that my junk car was parked on my land, but I didn't. I simply nodded. "All right, Jessica." I reversed the car and drove down the block, parking in the shadows behind a service van. As I walked back toward the brightly lit mansion, I could hear the music and laughter growing louder. I adjusted my tie, took a deep breath, and prepared myself. I was walking into the lion's den, armed only with a secret that could destroy their entire facade. I walked up the long driveway, the gravel crunching under my cheap shoes. By the time I reached the massive oak front doors, I was slightly out of breath, but the sound of jazz music and clinking glasses drew me in. I stepped into the foyer, and for a moment, nobody noticed me. It gave me a chance to observe the spectacle. The house was filled with people who looked like they had stepped out of a fashion magazine. Men in tailored suits, women in glittering evening gowns. And in the center of it all, holding court like royalty, were Mark and Jessica. "Welcome, everyone. Please, come through to the great room," Jessica announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She linked her arm through Mark's. "We are so excited to finally show you our forever home." I leaned against a pillar near the back, watching as she led a group of guests toward the living area. I followed at a distance, like a ghost haunting my own property. "This renovation was a nightmare, simply a nightmare," Jessica lied effortlessly, gesturing to the high, vaulted ceilings. "We had to fire 3 contractors to get this crown molding just right. Mark and I demand perfection, you know. We flew these crystal chandeliers in from Austria. It cost a fortune, but you can't put a price on quality." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. I remembered that order invoice clearly. Those chandeliers were from a local supplier in downtown, bought on clearance during a liquidation sale. And the contractors she mentioned? That was my maintenance crew, who I paid overtime to finish the job before the lease started. "It must be nice to have such liquidity at your age," a balding man with a cigar said to Mark, patting him on the back. "Real estate is a tough market right now." Mark puffed out his chest, looking proud but nervous. "Well, you know, hard work pays off. We've been saving and investing aggressively. This house is just the first step in our portfolio." Investing? Aggressively? I knew for a fact that Mark had asked me for a loan to fix his car just 6 months ago, a loan he never paid back. And here he was, pretending to be a real estate mogul in a house he didn't even own. Suddenly, Mark's eyes scanned the room and landed on me. His smile faltered for a split second. He whispered something to Jessica, and her face tightened. They excused themselves from their admirers and walked over to me, not with open arms, but with the stiff posture of prison guards approaching an inmate. "You made it," Mark said, his tone flat. He didn't hug me. He didn't shake my hand. He just looked at my suit, inspecting the frayed cuff of my shirt. "Hello, son. The house looks lived in," I said, trying to be polite. "Dad, please," Jessica cut in, her voice hushed. "Don't wander around too much. Stay near the buffet in the corner. And for God's sake, don't start telling your boring stories about the good old days or how much bread cost in the 70s. These are important people." "I just wanted to congratulate you," I said, looking Mark in the eye. "It's a big responsibility, a house like this." Mark looked away, unable to hold my gaze. "Yeah, thanks. Just grab a drink and keep a low profile, okay? We have a big announcement to make later." They turned their backs on me and returned to the circle of wealthy guests, leaving me standing alone near the kitchen door. I watched them laugh and toast with expensive champagne, knowing that the big announcement was built on a foundation of lies. Little did they know, the foundation was about to crack. The party was in full swing, buzzing, with talk of stocks and summer homes. I stood by the buffet, invisible. Waiters passed me without offering drinks, assuming I was hired help. In this room, net worth was the only thing that mattered. I watched Mark across the room, laughing with a man in a velvet blazer. I wanted to walk over and tell him I was proud, not of the house, but of him. But every time I stepped forward, his eyes darted away. He was avoiding me like a plague. I retreated to a quiet corner behind a large potted plant. That's when I heard her. Jessica was sitting on a plush sofa nearby with 3 friends, holding a glass of red wine. "Who is that sad man in the gray suit?" one woman asked, gesturing at me. "He looks like he wandered in from a bus stop." Jessica rolled her eyes theatrically. "Ugh, that's Mark's father. I told Mark we shouldn't invite him. He's a total burden." "What does he do?" another asked. "Nothing," Jessica laughed cruelly. "He's a retired factory worker. Honestly, we have to help him financially all the time. It's exhausting. I'm just praying he doesn't touch anything valuable. He's so clumsy." I felt a punch to the gut. A burden? Financial help? I had secretly paid off Mark's credit card debt just 3 years ago. Now she was painting me as a charity case to impress her shallow friends. But the real blow came next. Mark walked up to the group. He heard the end of the conversation. "Mark, honey," Jessica cooed, "I was just telling the girls how sweet you are for letting your dad come, even though he's so out of place." I waited. I prayed for Mark to say, "He's my father, and he worked hard." Instead, Mark shrugged and took a sip of his drink. "Yeah, well, we do what we can. Let's just hope he leaves early." My heart shattered. The son I raised was gone, replaced by a stranger in a cheap suit. I wasn't angry anymore. I was cold, numb. I turned away, my hands shaking, not from age, but from rage. My throat was dry. I grabbed a tall glass of ice water from a passing tray. I turned toward the center of the room, right where Jessica was sitting, near the pristine white rug she was so proud of. I didn't know it yet, but that glass of water was about to start a war. I stepped toward the circle of guests surrounding Mark and Jessica. I just wanted to see if my son would acknowledge me. As I approached, Jessica stopped talking. Her eyes narrowed at the glass of water in my hand. "Thomas," she snapped, "I thought I told you to stay near the buffet." The group fell silent. Mark stared at his shoes. "I just wanted to say hello," I said quietly. "We are busy," Jessica hissed, turning her back abruptly. As she turned, her elbow flared out and hit my hand. The glass slipped. Time slowed. The ice water splashed directly onto the pristine white rug. The ice cubes scattered across the floor. It was just water. But Jessica's reaction was explosive. "Oh my God!" she screamed, jumping back. The room went dead silent. Every head turned. "My rug! My antique Persian rug!" she wailed, dropping to her knees. "Do you have any idea how much this cost? It's irreplaceable." I looked down. I had to fight back a laugh. I recognized that pattern. It was a synthetic blend from my wholesale warehouse. Retail price, $200. Antique was just another lie. "It's just water, Jessica," I said. "It will dry." She slapped my hand away. "Don't touch it!" she shrieked, standing up, her face red. She looked around at the guests, playing the victim perfectly. "You see? I invite him into my home out of charity, and he ruins everything. He has no respect." Mark finally stepped forward. He put a hand on Jessica's shoulder. "Dad, seriously?" Mark said, shaking his head in disgust. "Can't you just not be a disaster for one night?" That hurt more than the slap. "Mark, she bumped into me." "Stop lying!" Jessica yelled, pointing in my face. "You did it on purpose. You're jealous of our success. You're jealous that your son is a winner, and you're just a nothing." The guests whispered. I stood there, water dripping from my shoe. She didn't care about the rug. She wanted a reason to get rid of me, and she just found it. Jessica didn't just want me to leave, she wanted an audience. She snatched the microphone from the jazz singer standing on the small stage nearby. The feedback screech made everyone cover their ears. "Music off!" she commanded. The band stopped instantly. The room was dead silent. Jessica turned back to me, the microphone amplifying her rage. "Get out!" she screamed, her voice booming through the speakers. "Get out, you old loser! You are a disgrace to this family." She pointed a manicured finger at the heavy oak front doors. "I tried to be nice. I tried to let you see how successful people live. But you come in here with your cheap suit and your clumsy hands, and you ruin my property. Get out of my house right now." I looked at Mark. This was his moment. This was his chance to be a man, to stop his wife from humiliating his own father in front of 100 strangers. "Mark," I said softly, "are you going to let her speak to me like that?" Mark looked at the guests, then at his furious wife, and finally at me. His face hardened. He made his choice. He stepped forward, grabbed my arm firmly, and pulled me toward the door. "You heard her, Dad," Mark said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "You've done enough damage. Just go. You don't belong here." "I don't belong here?" I repeated, letting him drag me toward the exit. "Mark, are you sure you want to do this? Once I walk out that door, there is no turning back." "Don't threaten me," Mark scoffed, pushing me into the foyer. "Go back to your little apartment and leave us alone. We have a reputation to maintain." He shoved me. Not hard enough to make me fall, but hard enough to show everyone that I was trash being taken out. I stumbled onto the front porch. "And don't expect an invite for Christmas," Jessica shouted from behind him, to the laughter of a few guests. Mark grabbed the handle of the massive door. "Goodbye, Dad." Slam. The heavy door closed in my face. I heard the lock click. Inside, I heard Jessica's voice on the microphone again. "Sorry about that, everyone. The trash has been taken out. Let's party." Cheers erupted. I stood there in the cool night air, alone on the porch. My heart was racing, but strangely, the sadness was gone. It was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They had made their position clear. Now, it was time to make mine clear. I walked down the long driveway to my car, parked in the shadows where Jessica had banished it. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't cry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Henderson, Property Management. I looked at the time. It was late, but Henderson would answer. He knew that if I called at this hour, it was business. Serious business. I sat in the driver's seat of my old sedan, the engine idling quietly in the dark. The humiliation I felt on the porch had evaporated. It was replaced by the cold precision of a businessman closing a bad deal. I wasn't a father anymore. I was the CEO of Summit Properties, and I had a problem tenant. I dialed the number. Henderson answered on the second ring, despite the late hour. "Sir?" Henderson's voice was alert. "Is everything all right?" "Henderson, pull up the file for 4500 Oakwood Lane," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of emotion. I heard the clicking of a keyboard on the other end. "I have it right here, sir. The Turner account." "Execute Clause 14B, I commanded. There was a brief silence on the line. Henderson knew exactly what that meant. It was the nuclear option in our standard high-risk leases. "Clause 14B? Immediate termination for breach of contract?" Henderson asked, sounding surprised. "Sir, are you sure? That requires serving a notice of eviction immediately. Usually we give a warning." "They are 3 days late on their payment." I recited facts, not feelings. "They are hosting an unauthorized, large-scale event without insurance, which is a violation of Section 8. And I have personally witnessed damage to the interior flooring. The contract is void." "I see," Henderson said, his tone shifting to professional efficiency. "If we serve them tonight, during the party, it will be messy, sir." "I want it to be legal," I said. "Call the local precinct. Request a civil standby for an eviction notice service due to a large crowd. Tell them the owner fears property damage." "Understood. I'm 20 minutes away. I'll have the paperwork ready." "Do it," I said. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. Through the windshield, I watched the glowing windows of the mansion. I could see silhouettes dancing. I could hear the faint thump of the bass. Jessica was probably laughing right now, telling her friends how she bravely stood up to her loser father-in-law. She thought she had won. She thought she was the queen of the castle. She didn't realize that the castle was built on sand, and the tide was coming in fast. I leaned back and checked my watch. 20 minutes. That was all the time they had left in their paradise. I didn't have to wait long. Exactly 18 minutes later, blue and red lights flashed against the manicured hedges. A police cruiser pulled up silently, followed by a sleek black SUV. Mr. Henderson stepped out, holding a thick leather folder. He looked calm, professional, and dangerous. I watched from the shadows of my car as they walked up to the front door. I rolled down my window to hear. Inside, the music was still thumping, oblivious to the storm that had just arrived. Henderson rang the doorbell. It took a moment, but then the heavy oak doors swung open. It was Jessica. She was holding a fresh glass of champagne, laughing at something behind her. When she saw the uniforms, her smile vanished instantly. She didn't look scared yet, just annoyed. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asked, her voice loud and dripping with entitlement. "If it's a noise complaint, tell the neighbors to buy earplugs." "We aren't here for the noise, ma'am," the officer said, his face impassive. "We are here to assist Mr. Henderson with a civil matter regarding immediate lease termination." The music inside stopped abruptly. Someone must have noticed the police lights. Guests began to crowd the hallway behind Jessica, whispering nervously. "Lease?" Jessica scoffed, laughing nervously. "You have the wrong house. We don't lease. We own this estate. My husband bought it." Henderson stepped into the light. "Actually, Mrs. Turner, you are in a lease-to-own agreement with Summit Properties. And due to multiple violations of your contract, including unauthorized events and property damage, that agreement is now null and void. Mark appeared behind Jessica. His face was pale. He looked at Henderson, then at the police, and finally at the folder in Henderson's hand. He knew. "What is going on?" Mark stammered, his voice cracking. "You are being evicted, Mr. Turner," Henderson announced, his voice projecting clearly so every guest could hear. "Effective immediately. The landlord has exercised Clause 14B. The party is over. Everyone needs to leave the premises." "This is insane!" Jessica shrieked, slamming her champagne glass down on a side table. "I will sue you! Do you know who we are? I want to speak to the owner, right now." The guests were no longer whispering. They were silent, watching the humiliation unfold. The owners were being kicked out. Henderson smiled a thin, cold smile. He reached into his folder and pulled out a single document. "The owner is actually nearby," Henderson said calmly, "and he has authorized me to deliver this personally." Henderson handed the document to Mark. Mark took it, his hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. He looked down at the signature line at the bottom of the eviction notice. "Read it," Henderson urged, his voice cutting through the silence of the room. "Read the name of the property owner." Mark squinted. His face went from pale to ash gray. He looked up at Henderson, then at Jessica, his eyes wide with pure terror. "No," Mark whispered. "This has to be a mistake. It says, Thomas Turner." "That's impossible," Jessica screeched, snatching the paper from Mark's hands. "His dad is a broke nobody. He drives a rust bucket. He can't own this house." "Actually," Henderson said, raising his voice slightly to address the entire room, "Mr. Turner owns this house, and the one next door. And in fact, he owns the holding company that built this entire subdivision. And he is standing right there." Henderson pointed toward the open front door. I stepped out of the shadows and walked into the light of the foyer. The crowd of wealthy guests parted like the Red Sea, making a path for me. I wasn't looking at the floor anymore. I walked straight up to my son and his wife, standing tall in my cheap suit. The silence was deafening. Jessica looked like she was having a stroke. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "You," she finally choked out, "you own this." "Every brick," I said calmly. "I bought it through a shell company because I didn't want to interfere with your lives. I wanted to give you a chance to stand on your own feet." I turned to Mark. He couldn't even look me in the eye. "I came here tonight as your father," I said, my voice echoing in the grand hall. "I was willing to overlook the fact that you haven't paid rent in 3 months. I was willing to overlook the fact that you lied to everyone here about buying this place. But then," I pointed to the spot on the rug where the water had spilled, "then you decided that I wasn't good enough to be seen in my own house. You humiliated me. You kicked me out." I took a step closer to Jessica. She shrank back, terrified. "You called me a loser, Jessica. You said I was a disgrace. Well, this loser is holding your lease. And since you violated Clause 14B by hosting this unauthorized party and damaging the property, I am accepting your resignation as tenants." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Someone in the back snickered. Then someone else laughed. Suddenly, the absurdity of the situation hit everyone. The rich couple had just been exposed as frauds who evicted their own landlord father. "You have 24 hours to vacate," I said coldly. "My security team will be here tomorrow at 6 p.m. to change the locks. Anything left inside will be donated to charity." "Dad, please," Mark whimpered, grabbing my sleeve. "We have nowhere to go. Our friends are watching." I gently removed his hand from my arm. "You should have thought about that before you threw me out into the cold, son." I turned to the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but this party is officially over. Please drive safely." The guests didn't just leave, they fled. Nobody wanted to be associated with the couple who had been publicly exposed as frauds. Within 10 minutes, the driveway was empty, save for my rusted sedan and their 2 leased luxury cars. I didn't stay to watch them pack. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. For the first time in years, the silence in my car didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. The next day at 6 p.m., Henderson's security team arrived at the mansion. Mark and Jessica were waiting on the curb with 4 suitcases. They tried to call me all day, dozens of missed calls, voicemails ranging from begging to screaming. I didn't answer a single one. I simply forwarded them to Henderson. They were evicted without incident. They moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, one that they actually have to pay for with their own money. I heard through the grapevine that Jessica's friends dropped her immediately. Without the mansion and the illusion of wealth, she was of no use to them. It caused a massive strain on their marriage. Last I heard, Mark had finally stood up to her. He got a second job and is slowly paying off his debts. Maybe, just maybe, hitting rock bottom was exactly what he needed to become a man again. As for me, I still drive my old car. I still wear my flannel shirts. But I did make one change. I updated my will. My assets will now go to a charitable trust that helps affordable housing projects. Mark will have to earn his own way in this world, just like I did. It's been 6 months, and I haven't spoken to them. Some people tell me I was too harsh. They say family is family, no matter what. Others say I taught them a lesson they will never forget. Now, I want to ask you, did I do the right thing? Or was I too cruel to my own son? What would you have done in my place if your child treated you like garbage in your own house? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, please destroy that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story about karma hitting back. The end. Thank you for listening.